o'clock on September the 10th. Going to continue, this is the Jamaica Selectboard opening. We have, the first order of business is to call for any late additions to the agenda. And I had a request from Rebecca from the Planning Commission. And we've got a pretty full schedule. But let's get through what we have to get done. If we've got some time, then we can squeeze you in. I don't want to feel like you're a second citizen. It's just that I want to get this stuff that we've got on the agenda first. But you're right in here. I'm putting you in so I don't forget. In front of public concerns.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the topic again? I just wanted.
Updating the board on our energy plan.
Okay. Good.
Alrighty, first order, second order, any other additions or deletion, additions to the agenda? Good, moving first, approve the minutes of the August 27th Select Board meeting. They were sent out to everybody electronically. Does everyone have an opportunity to look over and read them? Any additions, corrections, deletions? I have one thought. On the last page, second page, we should put in where it says 8:06, Paul made a motion, then there's a gap, and it says Greg made a motion. We need to put in, we went out of the executive session at 8:30.
Okay.
So I can give you the details later. That needs to be, with just technical aspects.
I have a question. Did we ever get the permit from the Corps of Engineers? For the ball field use?
I've seen nothing.
Okay, I don't know. I'll contact her tomorrow. I was looking at that. And she said, I'll get the permit to you right away or pretty soon or something. And I thought she was going to email it to me. And I'm like, well, she's probably snail mailing it.
Maybe. We haven't seen it.
I don't know.
Have we seen
Okay.
it?
So I'll ask her if she's got that process.
Sure. Okay, entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the minutes of the August 27th meeting are accepted as presented with the minor adjustment. Number 3, approve the timesheets for town offices, highway and transfer station. And number 4, both of them will be put to the end of the session as is our usual procedure to save the audience's time. First order of business, review and vote on the new sign ordinance. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the sign ordinance as presented by the sign ordinance people? So which one of the sign ordinance people would like to start this?
Well, I made a number of changes that Greg had recommended. Generally around the language we talked about at the last meeting, cleaning those things up. What else do you remember? What else you had?
What if you got my copy with my red marks on it?
I did that copy. So I went through it and I made those changes. That's based it on
And that was
Greg had
most
sent
of
me
what
an
I-
email.
Is that the new one that's online?
It's not online.
No,
The one I
it's not.
emailed, we emailed it out.
Email.
Yeah. I believe Sarah emailed it to you last
Okay.
Thursday.
And that's the one that's the most
That is
updated?
correct, yes.
Yeah.
And my comments were pretty much confirmed what came out of the meeting. I was taking
Sure.
duplicate notes, so it was more or less what you had come
Yeah,
up
there were
with.
a
A
few
few other
things.
things.
Dollar amount, application fees didn't match up, or penalty fees and things, so I went through and aligned all those and made sure those were correct.
We removed the banners across the road because obviously that's not legal. We removed the restriction on the LED lights where it said solely limited to the word open. We removed that. Catch me down if I
We
can.
changed the date, so any sign that is from today's date will be grandfathered in. versus
Yeah.
the
Realizing the
1988
grandfathering dates
and
were
whatnot.
kind
Yeah,
of,
it should be anything prior to today's date, or prior, actually it should be 60 days out. So I could,
From the exact
exactly, I will change that to 60 days out because that would be
Right.
technically when appointment would be today. So I will make that change from, I believe, September 11th to December 11th. September 10th is what I had, which is today's date. So I'll figure out what 60 days is and put that in, it'll be December
Sure.
9th or December 10th, and we can, so I'll make that change.
Any other?
That was
Everybody's okay with it?
pretty much,
Sure does cover the waterfront.
Listen, you guys put a lot of work and energy into this. Having said that, if you look on the page in section 124, it's just above what says 124, this is just typical. Number 6, C6, it says the applicant shall provide written permission. I guess I'm asking whether we need to provide the written permission or obtain written permission. Rather than having somebody, if I want to put
We're putting the onus on the property, on the person putting the sign up, rather than having the select board go out or the sign administrator go out and try to get permission.
Sure.
The person who is applying for the sign would need to go to the property owner and get that and then provide that to us.
then we need it written, we can't just.
I believe it should be written just to
Garage sale sign.
cross the T's and dot the I's. Yeah, I think we should have a written documentation. That's my opinion.
That's one of my questions. Another question, if you go down to A3. Signs, except LED lights as described in section 124A1 shall not be illuminated from within. Section A1, 124A1, doesn't say anything about LEDs. So I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Those are under illumination signs. May be illuminated externally only by steady white light, which will be fully shielded to prevent glare, excessiveness, or illumination of neighboring structures to emit no upward light. Illumination may be considered a traffic hazard, and then signs except LEDs described in section 24 shall not be illuminated from within. So basically, they're telling you that you can illuminate signs, but they can't be illuminated from within. So there has to be an external light pointing on them versus. That's my understanding.
I guess I'm looking at this and it's not describing LEDs in one, but you're saying that LED lights.
No, except LED lights. So signs except ones that are LED
Right.
cannot be illuminated from within.
LED lights can't be illuminated from within.
So the sign down and, what's the sign that, the Dakota sign actually illuminates from within.
Yeah.
That sign would technically not be allowed anymore, and you'd have to have a light, external light shining on the actual sign. That's how that's how the ordinance is written.
Now, does that one fall under the,
Anything that's there now is grandfathered. We're not making anyone go, we're not going back to all the business owners and making them change their signs. That's not,
All right, so
that's not the purpose of this.
Okay, let me read this in my head. I'm still not sure what it says. It says signs except LED lights, skip the phrase as described, shall not be illuminated from within. So you're saying it's okay to have LED lights illuminate from within?
Well, they have to, because that's the nature of an LED, a light emitting diode.
I know what that means, but I'm saying. you have
So
LED lights
basically what we're
shining on
saying is
something.
that when Coda puts up their LED sign, it will be lighted, the LEDs will be shining outward, it will be lit from interior.
I guess what I'm saying is you can have an LED light
That's
that
correct.
shines on something.
And that's not how I read it, no.
I mean, the LED stands for light emitting diode. There's lots of ways to employ light emitting
Signs
diodes,
except
one of which
LEDs.
is to shine it on things.
Yeah, you're right, I see where that could be confusing. Signs except LED lights. I think that what the idea behind this was, we were saying that if it was one of these moving or non-moving, because it can't move,
Right.
if one of these LED signs, that's okay, because that's obviously okay via the ordinance, but there's nothing to do, you can't light your sign with LEDs, you can't, from the internally,
No. What?
you can't have an internally lit sign, only the LED portion would be allowed. So technically speaking, if Coda took their sign down and put another sign up, it would have the glass, you can't have like a glass sign with something lit from within, even if it's incandescent or LED.
Okay, but this makes it sound like you can.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Change
It
that
says
language.
Why can't you? Why can't you have a sign lit up?
Because
That's what we
why
just
the way the
decided
ordinance
that
is
it
written.
Not so in keeping with the rural character of the town, that you could,
Even outside of town, like code and
We did
code
not-
out that way?
We did not divide the town into sections.
yeah, we kind of went around that a bunch of times to say, do we have such different ordinances within the village?
So is the village different than Rossville, that's different than East Jamaica, that's different than, you know, South Hill, West Jamaica.
Some of it too is thinking about, like in Bonneville, the 7-Eleven sign is a perfect example. Those types of signs, I don't think really, I mean, they obviously stand out, but it's kind of looks, you know, New Jersey-esque or, you know, kind of sprawlish. I mean, they're not really rural character signs. So that was the intent of this section, to kind of keep it to be a little bit, not necessarily only traditional, but, you know, those big backlit or internally lit signs.
McDonald's sign.
the McDonald's sign kind of thing.
I mean, we can change the language here, Paul. I mean, I could say,
I'm just reading this.
signs, as described in section, cannot be illuminated from within. You know, LED lights, LED signs, composed of LED light, you know, that's even more.
I mean, we can take it back and try to rework it, but that was what we're
If
talking
you're trying to accept LED lights,
We're allowing people to have LED signs. So like what we just approved for Coda and Coda, that sign is an LED sign.
right,
Those are still permitted, but you can't have a sign with glass or plastic and light it from within. That's how the ordinance is written. That's what that line is saying, that you can have an LED light because it's emitting light from within the sign. That's how LED works. It's a diode that shines light outward in the shapes of letters by, you know, you make. But you can't, it doesn't mean you could put LEDs inside a sign. Like I say, I can understand where someone could question that, but that's not, that wasn't how we had written that.
okay. That to me is confusing. Moving on
Okay.
to another one. We're gonna turn off all the lights between 11 PM and 6 AM, is that what you guys
That's
decided?
written in there, yeah.
Yeah. Does that fit with business owners who might like people who are driving through town or around town? Again, outside of town, I didn't realize you guys weren't gonna divide the town up. To know where your business is when they're coming in?
I mean, it definitely went through my head, being a business owner. I mean, because our sign is, there's people that drive up here at 1 AM in the morning,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
hoping to see the sign.
I think the Coda and Coda signs, if they would like, should be lit 24 hours a day, personally. I didn't know, I missed that.
Okay, I mean, we can strike.
I didn't even see that you were gonna shut them off. This is.
Some of that's recommendation too, from a light pollution standard. You know, a lot of the Act 250 permits do come back in and say the sign should go off.
Okay.
Ours specifically, the building where our property is located, not recommended, that was actually one of the items listed
In
there.
Act 250.
Right, that the signs, that the lights go off on the signs, that everything be LED. I mean, there's a lot of environmental standards that they put in there, so we were basing off some of that, but we don't have to follow that. I mean, that's,
The other issue with that is that if you have an inn or lodging and you have people coming in later than 11 PM, in the winter especially when it's dark, they might not see your location or think you're closed because there's no sign lit up. When I had my bed and breakfast, I didn't have a light for a while and that hurt us because people didn't see us, they drive by.
we can definitely, I would say, you know, modify that, you know, if the business is not open after those hours, and an inn obviously is open 24 hours, but, or some limitation like that.
Because so much of our traffic, if you will, comes through at different hours of the night, especially if they're coming in the ski season, and they're coming through town. It seemed like a good idea to let people know what's here. Maybe you want to hit it on the way home.
Our light is on all night long,
Mhm.
shining on
On
our
your
sign.
sign, yeah.
Yeah.
But I would
And
like to
plus,
keep it that
to
way.
be a security thing, or,
Yeah, well, we,
And it is security also, you're right.
if we all agree on that, we can strike that out of the ordinance. I mean, what is everyone's opinion? I mean,
Yeah, I
Nodding,
agree.
nodding.
Okay,
I'm perfectly good with
Okay,
that.
so let's delete 6.
6 is deleted.
Okay, do we not like feather signs?
No, we were against those, yes.
Is it like this? Does somebody already have one? Doesn't,
The feather.
I don't believe
Every
it.
once in a while, people put them up on the
That's
bank.
those feather signs, yeah.
I was thinking, of course, he's grandfather, but I was thinking that,
They got a hook on them,
Oh, right.
they moving around.
he's got the ski shop. Bischoff.
Bischoff, I don't know if
Does
he
he
does
have
or not.
feather sign?
I think he just has an open
Sometimes.
flag. He
Yeah.
Puts
doesn't-
one up sometimes,
Sometimes, yeah.
but he has a sale.
So here's the question, if he takes it down, does he have a problem putting it back up since he's used it historically in the grandfather era?
That would be the
That's a
question.
Good
good
question.
question.
Does he even have a sign permit for it?
Well,
That would be another question.
we're getting to that. We're getting to that. We'll put this on hold for a second.
Okay.
Back, an easy one, on section 132, it says waiver of fees by the sign administrator continued. Continued from where? Or is this just left over from something else?
Where is that, Paul?
Section 132? That title?
A, B, oh,
Waiver fees by the sign administrator.
Continued.
I think that might have been left over
Delete
from
that?
the previous formatting.
Probably, that's what I expected, but I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, and then, okay, on the next, let's see, this is the page where it says penalties.
Yeah.
on page 170.
I tried to align those.
Well, the dollars, I'm not questioning. The question I'm having is, fee from municipal complaint. An issuing municipal official is authorized to recover civil penalties in the following amounts of each violation of this ordinance. Who is an issuing municipal official?
That, to me, would be,
The ordinance person?
the
sign
sign administrator.
Yeah.
The sign
They would
administrator?
recover money, or the treasurer of the town.
And there's the question I have.
Or
Does the
the
sign administrator, does he become, this isn't defined in here about who the issuing
Okay, yeah.
municipal official is. Having said that, the sign, sign, what do we call him, administrator, my assumption is gonna be issuing the permits.
So he would be the person, or she
Issuing
would be the
municipal
person.
official.
Yes, so I will change that to sign administrator.
I hate to do this, but that's what I'm here for. If we're gonna call him an issuing municipal official, and he has the authority to, effect or accept fines, money, then we're gonna have a bonding process that we're gonna have to
Okay.
do to make him an official employee of the town, as opposed to merely someone that select board appoints to issue the permits.
Okay, so,
How come?
How come what?
Is someone on the select board gonna be the sign ordinance
We
person?
haven't gotten there yet, that's the next, but
No,
do it now.
well, to answer that question, we say no, because the select board is then the jury of any complaint.
Right.
So we can't
Yeah.
be the
Right,
jury,
can't be both.
we need another third-party person.
well, the person could accuse themselves too and drop out.
So then the question becomes, well, I'm putting this in this context, because then that's going to inform how we decide on the permitting official. Because if he's not an official municipal employee, how then can we justify having him fine people and collect fines?
You know, your health officer, which is me, can issue fines.
But that's a statute from the state, isn't it?
Well, there's also the flood,
Yeah.
there's a lot of other administrator and appointed people, there's flood zone administrator, I mean, they're not collecting
Just
fines, but
for
they're
instance.
collecting applications. I mean, I don't think it's a precedent
I mean,
that's new.
I guess
would
I'm,
it be, do we say that the treasurer collects money? Or the town clerk?
Or the constable could
The
issue.
constable? Yeah, I'm asking.
constable's a possibility. I guess I'm thinking, as I'm reading this, the only people who ought to be assessing fines are the select board. Now,
I
as
think
far
the
as
select
permits-
board should be, the person should be chosen from the select board if they're willing to assume the duty of sign ordinance administrator.
That makes sense, except their position about we
I
are.
heard
Yeah, I think that complicates it a little bit. Because then we
It's
end
just
up.
my opinion.
Sure.
Is it-
it is.
You guys
You're
should
right.
sort it out.
It's judge and jury.
Right.
Yeah, but who else would do it?
Well, that's the question we have to contend with.
I'm not looking for more things.
You have plenty of your.
No, I mean, though, as a board member.
Absolutely agree.
I think it should be someone separate. And then the question that comes in my mind, do we pay this person?
Even if we don't pay them, if he's gonna be in any way involved with money transfers, he's gonna be bonded, and there's all kinds of other little fuzzy little.
So
pieces
why don't
that
we just
I don't
say,
know.
why don't we just change it to the town clerk is authorized to recover civil penalties on the recommendation of the sign administrator?
I
So
don't even
basically,
understand the sign ordinance.
so the sign administrator would say, oh, this person's out of compliance, and then she could collect the money when that person comes
That's where
in
the
to.
money would go anyway.
Yeah.
Is to the treasurer.
Mhm,
So.
I don't think we need to like bond anyone.
mhm. No, but if
Well, we
she's
could
got.
just say the town, we could just say, the town is authorized to recover civil penalties, and we don't specify who the person is. It's just done through, like I say, the sign administrator, and send a bill to someone, say you're out of compliance, your sign's out of compliance, and here's your penalty, or.
Town collects
Who
fees for others.
collects the fees when Rob has to write tickets?
I was gonna ask that very question of the town
We
clerk.
do. Pretty sure we do.
What?
Who collects the fees from Ron? Ron.
Ron, our constable,
We've never, I haven't done that since I've been here.
Okay.
I believe they go to the town.
They come, but I don't know to whom. But he's got a constable, again, there's a state sequence of events, I don't wanna say statute, maybe it's a statute, on how he conducts his businesses, and that includes the assigning and collecting fees. We're generating a whole new name of something that there's no, to my knowledge, a legal base for it.
I think the town of Jamaica has like an ordinance concerning dogs.
That's
1, 2,
true.
3 bites and all that.
And this-
Like
he can
fees,
assess
you want
fines.
fees if it's late, you
If he
know.
wants to, if they don't register their, or license their dogs, he can give them tickets, he usually doesn't, but, and I'm pretty sure that it goes into the town receives those revenues.
I believe that's correct.
I mean, right now, there is a sign ordinance where there's fees where you have to pay your, I think it was
Like
$15 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The
Or any
permits
kind
So it
of,
goes to the town.
Overweight permits go to Terry.
Sure.
But those aren't fines in the sense of some kind of a judicial review and say, you're wrong, give me money.
I just think that
sign your
the,
name, please. Thank you.
I think that the issuing town official it's vague. So it could be anyone from the town. I don't think it's a specific person.
It sounds that way when you read
But
it.
it's vague enough that if it is the town clerk or it's someone collecting money for the town, so we can decide outside of the ordinance.
Right.
This person's gonna go, get, well, Sarah's gonna send out the bill and send it to them.
So you should identify.
Signed by the sign
Simply just say
administrator
the
saying.
town of Jamaica is authorized to collect.
If we said that, see, you suggested this, and they are following up on that, if we just said the town of Jamaica
Yeah.
is authorized to recover penalties, that takes us out of the issue of identifying another person
Right.
who then has the, judicial ability to fine somebody for misbehavior.
Okay.
So can we do that? Because
Yep.
I think that, I believe that sort of meets my concern about the issuing municipal, because we don't know that's an official.
That's fine.
And I
That's
just,
not what we've called the person here in this.
yeah. Well, that's it, we've been talking about a permit administrator, which we still won't have one yet. But at least this way, we'll get one, we don't put it in
And
that
I did
kind of
both of those paragraphs, not.
So we'll fee for municipal complaint.
And
So
also
this is the town is
civil
authorized.
Yep, I said town of Jamaica is authorized in both cases.
Do you have the other things we discussed that you were gonna edit? Do we have those?
What other things?
Whatever
From the
things
last
that
meeting.
we were gonna.
Yeah, that's, I said that, we did all.
Is there anything else, Paul?
I'm sorry,
Is there anything else
about what?
about the sign ordinance?
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, sure.
I noticed, while you're talking, that Rawsonville and the village is identified. Where does East Jamaica fall in all of this?
Probably the village in East Jamaica, a commercial village, and that's why.
Well,
we
there
did-
are some commercial, I mean, the gas station, of course, that's.
We haven't identified any differences in the sign, in the ordinance though,
And I-
specific
I
to those
think
areas.
Actually, Coda and
Coda
Falls,
technically could be over
yes,
there.
is in East Jamaica.
Yeah, we didn't, I mean, I think when we looked at it, we said that the central commercial areas of the town are Jamaica Village and Rawsonville.
Does that
versus East
mean
Jamaica.
that if somebody comes along and let's say buys the gas station and then do we have to go back now and edit? Or should we put something in there right now?
I don't, so when I look at, we did, what was that? That was the line you had asked me to add, Greg?
Oh, we put in a description,
Put in
there is
a
one place where it says
definition of
a
what it
signed
was.
district. And
Yes, sign district or.
Yeah, because they identified Rawsonville and the
Those
village.
were just examples.
Yeah,
I don't think we did.
we did not
Sign district.
identify those any
Give
specifics.
example, Jamaica Village, Rawsonville, we didn't I don't think there's anything
There's-
specified around the sign village, the sign district, we just
No.
added those in.
There's
You
no-
stated earlier that it's a blanket for all of them.
Correct,
For
yeah.
the whole town.
That's correct.
Okay,
But that was a new definition we put in.
okay.
So those were just examples
As-
given
as
of
long as
places.
that
So
was-
East Jamaica could be considered a defined geographic location and general use category.
Okay,
Or South Hill, or.
yeah, right, because we have all sorts of.
Yes, or West Jamaica
Areas.
for that matter, because West Jamaica is, there's not a lot of commercial activity out there, but
I move we accept the sign ordinance with the proposed changes, the couple changes.
Are we finished in looking at the individual?
well, we should go back to, what was your question? You
Well,
said-
now that he's moved it, we need a second for further.
There's no second, then forget it.
Do I have a second?
I don't hear one.
Hearing none, that motion dies. Your question was?
Do we need to go back and look at making sure that we have covered all of the questions?
I think the one big one missing right now is the administrator, who and when and where.
But you had mentioned something, you said, let's get back to that. What was farther up, you said?
Well, no, when we started talking about the issue of issuing municipal official.
No, well, before that,
Oh dear.
we kind of skipped, you said, well, we're talking about, oh, the feather signs.
Oh, yeah, we jumped from that. My concern about the feather sign was, I'm thinking this went up periodically, and if he takes it down, does that mean you can't put it back up again, or are we against feathers in general?
The sign was written, the three of us were against feathers in general.
Okay.
So that's, I don't know if they put any down in Rossonville, if
Well, they have
the
feathers.
coffee
at-
shop does, or the Fran's or the flower shop does.
They have feathers at the keep. They use feather signs at the,
Okay.
not I believe the snowboard shop across the street.
Okay, so is that a losing battle? I mean, is that gonna just create a lot of confusion and complexity if we say, you can't have feathers, but then these businesses have been using them for
And they
the
changed
last 15 years or whatever, are now saying, you know,
Have we
They
ever
can
done
use
any
it, yeah.
complaints about feather signs
Not that I'm aware.
since you've been on the
No,
board?
I don't, not since I've been.
And I'm not aware that a Keep or Rossville, anybody in Rossville, I know Fran had them at one point when she first opened, but that's
Fran?
just the Fran's
It's right by
kitchen.
his
so
door.
the-
Oh, I'm pretty sure I've seen them at the key. You don't think you have?
I don't know.
I know Nora's house has them out quite often, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna stake a claim to it, but I just don't think they're used frequently there. I don't, if we remove those from here, I can certainly live with that. I don't think it overall changes.
Well, I think that
tone
the
of
intent of the original intent of the thing that drove us into this was offensive lighting. And
Correct.
those are pretty benign. They just flap in the
Okay.
breeze and they're not lit.
Well, let's strike that out as well. That's easily done.
What about the used car flippy guy signs? I mean,
Which
those
are-
kind of fit in there too.
Dumping sign?
Yeah,
I haven't seen many of those in Jamaica.
there could be, that's what we're trying
Yeah,
to
they could
foresee.
be, for sure.
Okay.
You like the guys? Yeah. I know.
I'm ready
Thinking
for
of putting them outside of my shop.
So back to the real thorny piece that we've all been not talking about in real depth. How do we select? Do we solicit volunteers from the town to be this sign permit? How do we vet them? How do we decide who's going to be in the position to make these decisions?
I think that's a worthwhile conversation. I'm not sure
We do have.
that the document hinges on that. I mean, we can come up with a procedure to find a person.
But the document hinges on that person.
Not for
60
60
days,
days.
but
Okay.
potentially longer.
I don't wanna sit here for an hour talking about,
Define a person, right.
when we may have to talk to some people outside of here.
Yeah.
And like ask our treasurer if it would be a burden on her if she added that into her duties.
I mean, she's just gonna be collecting a check. She's not gonna be the
She
one
could-
going out and handing out the.
She could be the administrator.
She could be.
Burden the clerk with it, it could be anyone.
Does it need to be in the section where we describe the administrator?
Is
What do
there,
you mean, define it?
How that person is selected? Does that need?
It's not in here, but
Yeah,
that,
but I'm wondering if is there a need to put that in that section?
if I may parenthetically just throw something out just for the heck of it. This may be why it's taken us so darn long to get a new ordinance. These are not easy things to write when you start putting the legal pieces together and all the stupid little nuances of issues that can crop up that we don't usually see.
Right.
It becomes a tricky piece of legislature.
Right.
I don't
And
think
then
typically-
when we're in the middle of a problem and it's not there, then we're aware, oh, why didn't we do that?
I can't
Originally.
imagine, I can't think of any other ordinances in the town where there's a description of how fees are collected, how it's administrated, who's in charge of it. Who's in charge of it, yes, that's the title, but as far as the constable, the dog catcher, there's nothing in there that says how the constable's elected. It just says we have.
The constable's elected at the town meeting.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying the ordinances that the constable is responsible for
Sure.
don't document how that person's chosen.
But,
They just
well,
say, here's an ordinance, and I mean, I'm just trying to think of
Maybe
other,
Rob's the sign administrator.
What's that?
Maybe Rob will be the sign administrator.
trying to think of,
He's not on the additional board.
trying to find an example of other ordinances where they go into the level of detail of defining or the process to elect a person or support or appoint. I think the ordinance is kind of standalone of what they're governing, and how that person fits into that is totally outside the ordinance.
My thought on
Trying
that
to just
is,
think of stuff.
I hope you can come up with, I can't. My thinking is, if we write an ordinance, the employment of which is predicated on an individual who has not been identified or vetted, if they were identified, then we've written an ordinance out of smoke. Even though we have the ordinance saying we can't do anything, we built in here that the permit administrator is the one who exercises these things. We don't have anybody doing it.
I think we need to talk to our clerk and our treasurer, especially our clerk, our treasurer, because she may be able, she doesn't get mad at me, but she may be able to absorb that duty.
She can always collect the money, but she can't go out and look at signs.
Right, you're not necessarily looking at a sign, they present a design.
Right.
You look at the rules, does it fit the rules? If it fits the rules, then it's accepted, then you go out and inspect it and say, yeah, they did what they said they were gonna do and it's done. I mean,
We
that's
can
the
ask her.
process.
Just ask her opinion, and then, my sense is the board doesn't want a member to be the administrator, so that's out. And, I don't know what we'll sit here and talk about, who it might be, unless we ask around the
I-
I
I-
mean, and if we were
We could
to put,
still adopt this.
if we were to put in there, this person is elected from a person in town, that still doesn't give us a person. By putting the procedure of how that person is selected, still does not give us that person.
Correct.
So we still have to at some point either come up with them, we can put it in there, we can put it in the ordinance, or we can just figure out as a board how we appoint that position, or,
Here's the old ordinance.
Yep.
There is hereby created the office known as administrative officer. Such officer shall be appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen.
Have
And
we
then
got
there's
it?
we could add
then there's
that
a
in.
Board of Adjustment, which talks about creating a Board of Adjustment to deal with.
Read the paragraph about the definition of person.
There is hereby created the office known as administrative officer. Such officer shall be appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen. So that's in here.
Okay, so we could add that in.
So I could
We could add that in.
Yeah.
But we don't need to figure out how to do it right now, how to appoint somebody. how
But
to
I
vet
think
somebody.
that would be good to put in.
Can I see that paragraph? That paragraph.
Yeah.
Right, so if we put that in, at least we know that we appoint them
Yes.
as opposed to elect them in March.
Exactly.
Then we just go through the process of soliciting for people who are willing to do that, and then vetting them, much the same as we do other volunteers.
It'll take me a minute, but yeah, basically I'm gonna add in, language that says,
Well, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Good.
I think that covers it.
Except where it says,
So who is that person now?
I'm not gonna say here.
You got 60 days to go.
No, but I mean, that, since that was.
How about, sign actions?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It was hereby created. The office known as sign administrator. Such officer shall be appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen. No, the Select Board. Sorry.
Thank you.
Not the Jamaica Selectboard.
And then in section 5 down below, it says that if there is a violation, that person reports to the select board, and then the select board shall cause either the structure to be taken down or the fine. So it puts it back on the select board, he merely reports to the select board.
So what I did is I created a new section, section 107. That is that section. And I will adjust the table of contents to reflect that.
Okay, so shall we, you wanna look at it again next meeting?
No,
I think we, yeah, I'm with Andy.
no.
I think we should move,
I think we should adopt the ordinance now with the changes.
put the motion back up.
I move that we adopt this new sign ordinance with the changes we just discussed.
I'll second it. I mean, I know I've been involved with it, but
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there is a rush that's needed here.
That's a good question.
I don't know why we shouldn't move on it. Why should we talk about it again? And, what are we gonna talk about in 2 weeks?
My concern is, and I know some of you guys don't feel the way I do about this, but it usually takes me 6 or 8 times of writing something before I get it where I'm happy with it. So that's not unusual to have to make little adjustments.
Which we've made.
We made some, but that doesn't mean we've got a completed process until we all agree that it's a completed process.
I think we've gone through it. I do concur with what Andy's saying, is I think we've gone through it and made a lot of changes and honed it. This is the second time we've gone through this and made changes.
I think the changes we just made were significant too. I think
I
they are.
mean, there's a possibility we could delay it till next meeting, just as a vote next meeting, but then, we could get down the same rabbit hole of discussions. People have other ideas around it.
Or other things could pop up. I mean, I understand that we'd like to get this over with, because we're all sick of looking at it.
No, I don't, that's not,
I'm concerned about the
I just think that it's a good ordinance and we've got it sorted out. In that there is a business who is waiting to,
Which one?
it's called Uncommon.
They were given a go-ahead. They were given a go-ahead after
I
last
thought they
meeting.
were gonna put a different sign up.
Not to my knowledge.
I don't think so.
Because after our last meeting, we gave them a go-ahead, and I told them the next day to go with the go-ahead. So there's no clock ticking on this.
I think we should sit on it for another 2 weeks.
But there's a motion on the table.
Yeah.
And we're in the discussion. So, we've had discussion, we've had the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of adopting the town of Jamaica sign ordinance as amended this evening, say aye.
Aye.
I have 3 ayes. Any opposed?
No.
And 2 noes. So we have passed the ordinance as you have it. Assume that we've got everything the way we
It's
said.
written here. I will send that to
And I've got some things.
Sarah to,
Thank you, guys.
for the final copy of this. I fixed it up. Get that to you by Wednesday.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's a couple little technical pieces.
If you still, I can fix that.
Yeah, I'm putting them away.
Thank you.
Thank you. You got
So
it.
the process at
And
this
Lisa
point
also-
is,
Lisa,
we need
Lisa
to post this in 5 locations. We need to publish it in our paper of record that we've passed this ordinance, 5 places in town. We have to post at least a link to put this up online, a link to that. And then the town public has 60 days to petition. To review it and petition if they disagree with it. And if that happens, then we'll have to call a special town meeting to discuss the ordinance. That's my understanding.
This is mine as well.
And I sent that out to, I think I sent out that statute to everybody, so I will, I'll follow up with that, but then I'll follow up with you, Sarah, to make sure we get that posted in the right spots and stuff.
Okay, next item. The next item of business is Sheriff Factory update and discussion.
Well, I can lead in, I guess, and then introduce the Historical Country Foundation. As everybody, most people know, there's some damage done to the roof of the historic town chair factory. We've been kind of struggling with trying to find some estimates and people to do the work on it. We've got some insurance estimates, and the conversation kind of went back to where is this building, what's the future of this building? It's been there and it's obviously got some historical significance. But if it's just gonna kind of fall into the ground, we should do something about that. And putting money into a fancy roof on a building that may not have a life, whether it's physical or other use, social, whatever the other. So we kind of invited, the Historical Foundation, Karen and Lou are here.
Lou and Michael Abrams is
Okay.
on his way in also.
Yeah, so they'll come in a few, and I understand you guys have just, I mean, it's more of a conversation, I think, at this point.
It is just a
And some ideas, and we wanted to get those out in public. We don't necessarily want the building to fall into the ground, but if there was no motivation behind it, it was kind of a hard ball to keep up in the air. So,
Wait until Lou gets-
okay.
What else do you have to say about it? We're just in the beginning stages,
Mhm.
and we have discussed it at a meeting, and everyone, here they come now.
Just for the record, name and historic site. Just to get it identified on camera.
I'm Karen Amadon, president of the Jamaica Historical Foundation.
Michael Abrams, member.
Lou Russo on the Historical Foundation.
So, at our last meeting, we discussed the possibility of helping to restore the Old Town Mill, the Old Town Barn. Jamaica had many mills on the streams and brooks and rivers, and this seems to be the last remaining mill that we have. We have thought about restoring it if we can get some grants and with the help of the town, and Rebecca Ohm has agreed to look into grant writing. And well, that's about where we're at. We're still in the beginning stages of it.
You have a question?
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of keeping it, but isn't this Joel Blooming? Isn't this something that the town might want to have a vote on?
Perhaps.
That's just my suggestion, that maybe a town meeting and a town vote on it.
Perhaps.
And see if the town is willing to support this idea.
And in order to have a vote, we need to have something to vote on, and we're still in such early stages, we haven't even got a couple of options to choose from at this point. But, which is why we want you guys involved, because it's a historical structure. To the extent that history can be dragged, kicking and screaming into the 21st century, there may be some hope. You guys are the experts in that.
And I
I'd
think,
like to just hear about the grant possibilities. I think that's a discussion in itself. I mean, money to help revive it. I know that, the little I do know, I know that that's not on the historic registry, right? Am I right there?
Right, I
But-
don't believe it is.
You know, I don't see why the Historical Society Committee couldn't look into funding and, you know.
I think that's how it kind of all started. The building is, the town, the insurance valued building is roughly $45,000, and we were coming up with quotes to redo the roof to do the whole roof, and then you look at it, there's lots of pieces, and it really does need the whole thing done, and that's not even what's underneath there. Anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000, and we're saying, okay, we're gonna put $35,000 into a $45,000 building. So that's how the discussion started, and if grants come up and other things that really make this well worthwhile, we've got the potential to get some insurance money to redo the roof, but we don't wanna have a Cadillac roof on top of something else that's rotting out underneath. So this whole discussion, you mentioned a few, builders and things like that. I mean, just to do some assessments on the building and then looking at some other potential uses for the building. It's also, it's nice to have a historic building, but it'd be even nicer if it was actually used and people could see it, visit, or whatever it might be. I don't know.
That's my question. And what would it be, let's say it does get restored, what would you, as the Historical Society, use it? How would you use it?
Well, we've run out of room in the Historical Foundation building that we have, in the old bank building. And we're storing some items to be put in for future displays, or we change the displays around. In this mill, the daughter of the mill owner is still alive. She's 90 years old. She lives in Connecticut, and she's been helping tell us stories about the mill and what it was used for and how it was set up and things like that. If one of the possibilities that we've talked about is making it into a mill, looking like a working mill. Again, there's also the old town derrick from the 20s and 30s that is in the barn. Peter Andrus has expressed a lot of interest in putting that back together. He says that we could be the only town in the state of Vermont who still has their derrick from the 20s and 30s that was used to rebuild the bridges and roads when we had the floods back then.
What is it? Is it a, like a crane almost?
Like a crane, yes.
They're all mechanical, block and tap, or pulleys.
Right, exactly. So it would move the big stones in to build the bridge abutments. So he would like to put that back together and put it in there. So we've talked about maybe having a flood museum in there also with the derrick. And we've had other ideas also, but those two are the main ideas.
I think one of the things we suffer from is the ability to show large items in that bank building, because it's a small building. This would be a building where we could put larger items like the derrick. We've got some things that are being donated to us that we just can't handle right now because they're so big. I should point out that if you look on our website, there's a little article about the Cheney Mill in there. Michael had done a nice little article, so I would encourage you to look on our website and just look at that article, just to get a little historical perspective about that particular building.
Is that the official name of Cheney Mill?
As far as I can find. There's a few other names attached to it, but that's the most prevalent one. The owners were two brothers, Cheney, and one of them lived in our house across the street from it.
I guess we're just throwing the phrase "the chair factory" around because we didn't have any other real.
Oh, there's actually another structure that's was at the end of Factory Street.
Although in this mill that we're talking about, they did make chair
Yes.
stock.
Mary Cheney, sister, wrote an article in a local paper. I can't remember which paper it was, but she talks about her uncle, one of the brothers, being injured by a large amount of chair legs falling on top of him. That episode occurs in the article. That kind of thing is interesting. She gives a lot of life to what we just see. We see a building that she's been writing letters and sort of filling in blanks as to some of the things that went on there.
I've got a question, Greg, as it's raining outside tonight, with the damage to the roof, what's happening? Is it damaging, is water and such getting inside the structure that's causing additional damage?
It
Or
is certainly
additional
getting
damage?
in the structure,
Okay, so
and you can only assume it's causing more damage the longer it's there.
okay, so we do have sort of a time frame that we need to do something to shore that up so we're not getting further damage.
I would say the building's at a tipping point right now. I
Okay.
think this is the time to save it, or you can let it go. I mean, it is, the way it looks, if you look at the back of the roof, I would say this is the moment.
Keith and I looked at it about a
Tarps
year
up or
ago.
something to keep the rain out. I know people do that,
Yeah.
if they don't, in the winter, let's say, when they don't have the weather's not right to fix the roofs and stuff, just to keep the moisture out.
It's also in the flood zone.
It is, yes.
So what does that mean in terms of its life?
Obviously, if you
Existing.
were to do some rehab work on it, you can do maintenance on it, but you can't do any rehab work on it without a flood zone permit, conditional use permit. We'd have to apply for that. And anything that was below the base flood elevation would have to be flood-proof.
Yeah.
But, so we'd have to do some investigation there too.
Sure.
I think that you have numbers like $20,000 and $35,000. I think that those are unrealistic numbers, and I think before you even make any decisions, you should know what it would cost to actually rehabilitate the building.
Yeah, especially with the flood zone.
Once you put a roof on it, however much it is, and then you find out it'll cost $150,000 to restore it, you should know that in advance.
Well, exactly, and that's kind of where the start of the conversation was, at least from my perspective, that we're gonna put on this roof, satisfactory roof, even if it was $10,000.
But even what Tom said, you can put tarps up and stop, at least try to stop some of the deterioration.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Certainly could.
We've talked to Peter Newton, and he's going to look at it very soon. He's sort of an expert on old barns. And then he'll get back to us. He didn't seem to be overly concerned at the moment with the hole in the roof and putting a tarp over it immediately. But we'll let you know what
Winter's
he
coming
says.
too, you know,
Winter is coming, yes.
with the snow.
So let me ask you another question. Let's assume for the sake of argument that it proves to be untenable to keep it. There's a couple of options, one of which is, I understand, not being a carpenter, I don't know this for sure, but I understand that the timbers are pretty valuable. And that the cost of taking it down may be borne by the individual who wants to keep the timbers. Is that accurate?
Someone offered to do that years ago.
Yeah, that is
I
probably
understand.
true. Those type of timbers are valuable.
Now,
Somebody offered to do that and the town turned them down
This barn,
years ago.
this barn place charges $20 a foot for an 8x8. On the other hand, somebody down with 30 burnt the barn down. Didn't bother to recover most of it.
There was an incredible market for it 15, 18 years ago for any barn board.
Yeah.
That was just, I just wanted to bring that up because the contractor around here had offered to take it down. It was in a lot better shape than it is now.
well, that's kind of the question, back to how much time we have. And the other piece of it is, if it belonged to the Historical Society as opposed to the town, could that barn be monetized in your benefit? Perhaps another structure on your properties, I don't know how we can figure this out, but for the large projects would be cheaper than trying to reconstruct in a floodplain something that has value only in its removal.
It might be.
Yeah, I would agree with you, other than the fact that there is no other place like it anywhere near here that represents what happened in the middle 1800s, early 1900s. Does that historical significance have value? That's why I would recommend that somebody look into what grant opportunity, not write a grant right now, look into what kind of entities give grants for that kind of structure.
Would that be something the Historical Society would be qualified and capable of doing? Since that's your area of expertise?
Well, we're looking into it.
Right.
Is that putting the horse before the cart? No, that's the wrong way around. The cart before the horse. Because I would think that he would want to know how much it will cost to restore.
That should be a
before-
parallel effort, yes.
Because to go ahead and you start writing grants, you've got to ask how much that you need.
And
And
with
we have
that,
to figure out what we would want to do.
Right.
exactly, for a grant, you're gonna have to tell them what you're gonna do, the
Right.
time frame, the cost, the expense, how you're gonna
Exactly.
sustain that expense over time, the maintenance issues, there's a lot to this
There
process.
is.
Yeah.
And as has been pointed out, winter's coming. Now, granted, this building's been there for a long, long time, but it hasn't been there since this last blast of winter, scratch that, of storms that we had that took the roof out. There's effectively no roof on the lee side of that building. So everything in there is gonna be subject, even if you put tarps on it. I mean, I don't know what it costs to throw tarps up, but put them up properly to withstand winter is not gonna be cheap either.
Right. Especially with the weight of the snow.
So,
So we will continue to look into this.
I think Tom's point about winter coming in, there is a time frame to the extent that it's not a clock running out, but it's a calendar running out. And so even if you guys select an option of restoring and maintaining, we still have winter coming. Taking it down would be a little bit less time critical, but that's something to consider.
What's the best way to get an estimate for what it would cost to target, so we could give us a little bit more time?
I'll call Pete.
I work with Pete,
Okay.
and you should call Pete a lot. He's busy and he
He
likes
said
to
he's
be
very busy.
reminded a lot.
Okay,
If I see him, I'll mention it to him, but
okay.
he's really, if you get him down there, it'll be a really good help for you. He could say yay or nay, really.
Now, what about Joel and Judy's suggestion of getting someone to look at what it would cost to actually restore it? Is that something that maybe the town could spend a little bit of money for an architect's fee or an engineer's fee or whatever it would take?
I think if you got Pete to look at it first, he's a post and beam expert, has been doing it for, 35, 40 years, that he could at least look and see if it was worth hiring an architect.
Instead
That's
of
just
just
a
saying
thought.
with the Newtons, I'd say that, I mean, they've got that, just say, hey, is it worth even looking at? I mean, and they can give, each one of them could give a good assessment of what it might be. I mean, in a big number, not down to the penny, but.
But I understand where Lou's coming from, because I don't think that they could, like, do the work, even patch the roof or cover it, but. Or do we want to hire someone out and out to go and assess the whole building from a engineer point of view, or?
I would.
That's taxpayer money, I mean,
Want that to happen,
I think if we start spending money,
yeah.
the town's money, that maybe that should be talked about at town meeting before we do that.
Well, I do know that about maybe 8 or so years ago, there was one of our reserve funds was to maintain that building.
Right.
We moved the money from that reserve fund into the general building reserve fund.
Okay.
So there actually was some interest in the town before to spend some money to try to keep that building.
I think there was about 45,000 in
Something
the
like
account.
that.
That's why we turned that, not we, but that's why they turned down the contractor who offered to take it down for the material.
Right. So if you were to think about that money as having been kind of allocated for that project, there might be a little bit of money at least to look to see if it's worth doing or not.
Right. I would agree with that.
So
Well, go ahead.
we'll do some work and get back to you in 2 weeks.
Can you please?
Okay.
No, my thinking is, if we put it to a vote, which ultimately any major expenditure needs to do, it's gonna be a hard sell to keep that thing up, quite honestly. Maybe from this side it's not too bad, but you drive up Pikes Falls Road, it's pretty much shot.
Yeah,
And it hasn't been, I mean, the use, we're really glad we had it when we didn't have any place to put the stuff when we were building the new garage. Now we have room for all the stuff. It has served a purpose. It's a tough call. It's a tough call, and I say to anybody watching at home, any ideas, send them in.
It's a tough call, but we're also needing more space.
Right.
People are donating many items to the Historical Foundation.
There may be a cheaper way to get you more space.
And just one other question, will you keep the bank building historical society and then just use this for a,
Larger displays, larger.
and maybe referencing the floods of the past? I think that's a cool idea.
I think it would be a great place to highlight the commercial activity that was in this town
Right.
in the 1800s and early 1900s.
Sounds like a good idea, it also sounds expensive.
Well, but we're not,
There's money out there.
as a board member, I'm not biased on this. I think it's great that all of you are willing to spend some time to look into that, and never mind thinking about writing grants and trying to capture Pete to come have a look.
That is tough.
So going around in circles, I brought him up like 2 or 3 times already, but I think he'd be a big help.
He would be.
I think it's worth exploring.
That was the point of the conversation, is to get your ideas, get you on board, and it's, there's an awful lot of, different options, all of which cost money inevitably. But anything we as a town are very much in favor of the energies you guys put. I think that bank building is superb as a tourist trap. Didn't say that.
Tourist attraction.
Attraction, that's what I meant. I just abbreviated
The whole
it.
word.
But the idea that we could have something else, maybe in a different location, I'm not sure if that'll work. But clearly, that would be a really good idea. Let's see what happens. Having said that, winter's coming.
And not just a tourist trap, there are many locals who come in
Yeah.
and looking for all kinds of information.
Trap, I apologize for using the word trap.
That's
That was
okay.
Half our residents are out of state.
short, that was shorthand for attraction.
We actually have had quite a number of visitors this year.
Yeah,
Yes.
good.
That is good.
All right, any other comments? Any other pieces?
Well, I just had one more little thing. Please all get on to the website that we have. I don't know if you have or not, but Lou especially has.
And what is that website?
JamaicaHF.info. The HF, of course, stands for Historical Foundation.
JamaicaHF.info.
Right.
Not com or net.
There were too many Jamaicans out there, all those
Right.
sites were
There's a
taken.
bunch of them.
But
Well,
there are thousands of photos
Yeah.
and all kinds of information. Every vital statistic from the town's on there. It's
Yeah.
really quite wonderful.
I've been there and I will attest that I recently, bought an older home and got to go out and see pictures of my house, and it's all, you type in the address
Oh, yeah.
and click on the address and it lists all
Oh,
the pictures
cool.
of that address. It's really fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Great job by Historical Foundation.
And I collect antiques.
All righty then. Moving on, the next thing on the list is this will be quick, update on the water feasibility study. Water sampling, will start on Wednesday or Thursday of this week, Wednesday and Thursday. There have been some people who have been selected. There's a gentleman named Mark Johnson from a company called RCAP Solutions. They have the state contract for the water testing. They, our contractor selected, I think, 10 different locations around that kind of represent all the water table issues. And so I understand that today Mark was making contacts for those testing. Testing's going to be pretty exhaustive, very exhaustive, because it's in concert with a state study. So more than we needed, but it's free. The price is right. I mention that because the hope is to have a draft report by September 21st. And that's going to be prepared kind of based on what they get from the water study. One or two of the tests that the state, the RCAP people are going to do are pretty exhaustive and they take a long time to do. So I was talking to Chrissy today and they're going to ask them if they can give us an interim report with the stuff we need and save the exhaustive stuff for later. So we can get a draft report by the 21st of September.
That's good.
Paul, I can speak a little bit to that because they contacted me today.
Oh, good.
3 tests that they're doing. Radioactive isotopes is one, organic, so E. coli and coliform and those types of things. And the third is inorganic chemicals type of thing. So those are the 3 tests they're doing. And so,
They sound like pretty exhaustive.
yeah, they seem
Yeah.
pretty,
Sounds like
I think it's
This,
$150 test, or I think $160
Yeah, they're not cheap.
test.
Is the state doing it?
Yes, this is contracted for the state.
Okay,
Okay.
now, I opted out of the test.
Oh, did you?
Yes, because say they test your well and it's all screwed up.
Mhm.
Is the Agency of Natural Resources, do they get that information and then force you to drill a new well?
I have no idea. I don't believe.
Well, it
that
came
they're-
up in the last
That's a good question.
Wyndham Regional meeting that if there's private water testing done, you're covered, you're protected by HIPAA,
Mhm.
like your medical records. If the agency, the EPA or the Agency of Natural Resources gets it, they can force someone to fix their water supply.
Interesting.
I don't know the answer to that. I know this particular company is doing a survey for the state about water all over the state, but it's connected to the water,
Right.
state water table. I don't know how it's
I
connected
didn't
to
know
that
that
at all.
until I went to that meeting.
Yeah, I've not heard that at all.
But anyway, my water tested fine for just kit A from the state for E. coli and the coliform. That's as intense as that, or in depth as that test kit.
Because you had a bunch of test kits right after Irene that you had passed.
And then when, as health officer, when there's a request for one, that's the one that passes the state.
Okay.
It's just the simplest one, not this more exhaustive.
Yeah, I have no idea. That's the first I've heard about that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I could call.
It'd be nice to know if there was uranium or radioactivity in your well, but
I'm going to.
maybe I don't want to know.
What's keeping you healthy?
Why are you glowing, Andy?
I just love being here.
Turn the lights off.
Monday night. Back in Monday. Doesn't get any better than this. That's where the glow comes from, Tom.
He lights up the room when he enters.
I will call her tomorrow and put that question to her. Anyway, so that's where we are at this stage. Moving forward with water testing. So any other questions about that? That's just the update I have for that.
And that draft comes to us, correct?
I'm sorry?
The draft comes to us.
Yes. All right, so next item is the VLCT's request for a voting delegate for the annual meeting. The annual meeting is Wednesday, October the 3rd at 12:30 p.m. They're looking for someone who can be a voting delegate for the meeting. Anybody's welcome to go to it, but we need to designate a voting delegate.
I would like to volunteer, so to speak, for that.
Okay, anyone else?
Did Rebecca request to?
That was for a different
Oh,
meeting. It
okay.
was a couple of days before.
All right.
Sure.
I'll make a motion to appoint Greg Mellons, the VLCT voting delegate for their annual meeting from the town of Jamaica.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Thank you. I think that's an excellent choice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You thought I forgot, didn't you? It's been down there before. Okay, great. That's not gonna work. I need to turn that off. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay, the next item. Judy has been asking for something for months now, about getting a facilities manager to kind of look at, kind of supervise all the facilities we have. What we have done is we talked to Keith about putting that under the general rubric of the town crew, the town road crew. And he said it works out good for him because he has somebody who's done that for years on board, who likes to do these kinds of things, who also goes past these buildings every time there's a snow. So he said that fits in very well with what he has for his people. And so it seemed like a pretty good idea. Presented to the board. Thoughts?
Who talked to him?
I talked to Keith.
They're news to me.
Well,
My question is, can we,
I'm the road commissioner, I didn't hear anything about that.
it didn't seem like it's a road thing.
well, that's my
Well, it's
question.
part of their, how much time is that gonna take? That'd be my question.
I asked him if it was going to interfere, and he didn't think it was. You know, I didn't want to put it on him without making sure it was something he could manage.
What's the job description? I mean, are they going and shoveling the snow when it snows? That's one thing. Are they going in and maintaining the town hall and waxing the floors or washing the floors or cleaning the bathrooms or whatnot?
We haven't got that far.
What's the job
It was
description?
my understanding, or what I was proposing, is that this person have a handle on what the needs of each of our 6 buildings that we have, and somehow prioritize what needs to be fixed. So that we don't run into, well, my building's more important, or my building's more important. So that we are able to try to get into a maintenance project type of thing. And I don't know if that would fit into what Keith is thinking.
Well, when
or
Keith and I were
not.
talking, we weren't thinking in terms of these guys doing the cleaning and stuff. That wasn't
No,
kind of
I'm
just,
not even,
just
but
keeping
it's the
track of them.
maintenance.
If he goes by and the heat's
Yeah.
not, lights are all on, or he's not working,
Right,
then reports back upstream and we can get somebody to do the work.
right.
But just somebody who can keep track of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for example, if the bank building needs some caulking on a window, that goes on the list. But let's say this town office needs a patch on a roof, that certainly would be a priority, and that person would prioritize all of the buildings and what their needs are, not maintenance in that they're going to go do work. Their basic is to check the condition of the building, of each of our 6 buildings, and prioritize so that we, as a board, have some idea of what's ahead of us. And even when it comes to setting up our budget, we can begin to even allocate money from what the priority of the building repairs need to be.
Yeah, I know Paul and I talked about this a little bit too, and that was some of the reason to get it onto the agenda for the specifics. And my read on it would be that the road crew would be more of the eyes and ears, just because they are out there all the time. But I think what Tom said, that we need to really structure, whether it's a job description or, they're not gonna go out and re-caulk the windows. Unless we said, hey, you know what, you got an extra hour today, go re-caulk that window, but I don't think that fits into their
No,
description.
it's looking
But-
at what needs to be
Yeah.
done for the building to keep it in
Right.
good shape.
And I don't know that, maybe they're not the experts on this, so that was part of the reason to have this be a discussion. I think just having them out there and be the eyes and ears, they might just say, hey, you know, I noticed the roof blew off the chair factory, and nobody else noticed it. Doesn't mean they're fixing it, doesn't mean they're necessarily in charge of,
No.
and they're probably not gonna be the one that says, you know, the furnace needs to be cleaned down at the bank building, because it hasn't been done in 2 years, they don't know that. So there's still a lot of detail in this whole thing. So
Yeah.
this, I think is a good start, it's not even a start, but it's a piece.
Well, part of it is that they're out there in town observing stuff. I mean, I never see stuff. And I think that was
And
kind
they
of,
have a place to pass it back to, I think,
Yeah.
is key.
Yeah.
I mean,
It doesn't come up to us.
and they're not, I don't think this is one little piece, there still needs to be a bigger, you know,
Sure.
what does this building need on a regular basis? What does that building need? What-
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
Yeah, it's a pretty big job. And I think it also takes some kind of knowledge of, well, for example, the town hall right now. We're not sure whether we have a sill problem or not. We need somebody to be able to say, yes, you do have a sill problem, and that needs to be fixed. Or up at the schoolhouse, they're having leakage again around the chimney. Those are the kinds of things that is how I picture it happening. And so there needs to be some level of expertise.
Sure, and I don't see them as the experts in repairing it. There just needed to be, as you asked for a number of times, a central source to go to,
Right.
as opposed to once every 2 weeks showing up here. And so that way somebody can contact. And if it's urgent, then he can certainly reach us pretty easily. You had your hand up.
Could I point out also that certainly the school and the library have boards, they have people that are responsible for operations inside of those buildings, that they would be the first line of people who would actually acknowledge that something is a problem and report it to this entity that you're proposing to establish. That I don't think it, just my opinion as a private citizen, I don't think it's a good idea to place someone, say, on the road crew responsible for inspecting the library when there's a board of library trustees that is responsible for the operations of that building.
no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I would
I
agree with
just-
that.
I
But
just-
this tells, now they know who to call.
As you're putting into place methods for reporting and acknowledging problems, that keep in mind that especially the school and the library already have a
Right.
you know, people in place.
Actually, the library comes under the town's jurisdiction,
Yeah.
but not the school.
Right,
So
the
what's the-
school facilities are the first line of people.
But yeah, somebody could report and say, we think we have a problem with the leak and blah, blah, blah.
And we at one point had talked about having each building have their own board of trustees, so to speak. I mean, for here in the office, it's Sarah and Terry, and for down at the town hall, it's Tom and Judy, because they're in there.
Informally, it
Yeah,
does work out.
yeah, and we just need to have a structure of that.
And there's somebody who's available 5 days a week. We know where to find him, but he's got an answering machine. So it's just, the point isn't for them to do it. I think, I don't mean to say that. I'm just saying that gives us a point.
I understand what Judy is alluding to. You could have, Rebecca's correct, the Historical Society has told us a number of things, you know, they're on the ball, they're in the buildings. But if you wanted to have somebody walk through once a year or something, get a Chris Parker or some barn restoration guy or some general contractor who wouldn't be necessarily looking for, that's the hook, is looking for work, but he could be, say, we know there's some things wrong with that building, with the town hall, have someone go in and confirm them, have them take a look at the Historical Society, the library roof was leaking, a citizen told me, I don't know if that's been addressed, but could have a contractor or somebody go through and just sort of look at the buildings, if it would put you at ease, or at least you're at that building,
Right.
and say,
And
you
it's
know, and then we could deal with the priorities of what buildings worse, but I think that they are, obviously, the town hall is under, you know.
Duress.
No, it's under duress, but people are paying attention, they're looking at it.
Yeah,
From the town, you are, Tom.
yeah.
Arts Council is.
But there are other places too that we can't ignore.
Right.
Because then what happens is unless we kind of keep it on an ongoing basis of an inspection, then all of a sudden we have a major catastrophe.
Right.
And then everything has to go into that. Where at least if we have someone who's doing the inspection, we can get some kind of a list saying, well, things are not looking too well, but I think we're okay for a while. And maybe that place would move up to the second level, almost like bridges, and how they do bridges.
Hopefully a little faster.
Right, I would hope a little bit faster than
We have
bridges.
limited resources, so we have to, yeah.
Right.
Well, we do, and that's the, part of the issue is, didn't mean to imply that these going to be polished floors, but to have somebody who
I didn't
routinely
either.
sees that,
No, I
and can see the buildings, because they at least see them. We don't have that at this point. You know, we've got the historical when they're in, and arts when they're in, and, I mean, and we get word from the Rossendale School when they have their things. So there's all kind of piecemeal, and a lot can go wrong between the pieces.
Right,
So I think having a central point of contact,
great.
we can work on the specifics. But this is the open gamut about whether this is something we think this is a good idea. I did talk to Keith, and, because I didn't want to blindside him, but I thought that might be something that we could make use of, and I think that helped the town and answer some of your questions and yours, because periodically the Arts Council says, hey, look, there's a light light bulb that's not working or whatever. And that sort of thing may be manageable by our guys,
Yep.
you know?
Okay.
All right, so that's what that's on for. So I'm just going to give you a heads up on that one.
So we're doing that?
Do we, well, that's the question. Do we want to write a job description for Keith? And if you want to think of it as part of the road, it's okay with me. But write a description describing exactly what we'd expect, as opposed to using our imaginations at the time of the crisis.
I'd personally like to talk to Keith.
Do you want to put
And
this
I'd
on?
I'd like to voice my opinion to him
Mhm.
as road commissioner,
Okay.
whether it be for or against. And That's all I gotta say about that.
Okay, so we'll
Yeah,
table
see
this
what
until.
his
the next
ideas
meeting.
are.
I don't think that we should add that in. I'd like to look at their job description, I'm sure that's not in it.
Probably
I
not.
know that you're talking about adding it in, but I think that there's some other things the road guys could be doing. I mean, I don't know how much time that would take, but they've got a lot to do, and they could do more. I mean, I'm not saying they don't do enough, but there's always something going on.
Sure.
So I'd like to ask Keith.
All right, so we'll table
You
it.
don't have to put it off for that.
No, I think
I'm not
too-
gonna vote on it tonight and
No,
right.
talk to him.
Well, this is a discussion. I didn't put it up for a vote,
Yeah.
but wanted to see what we're feeling.
I think there should be a job description of what we need
Right.
and what we're all talking about here. And then we say, Andy brings it to Keith and says, is this something you think you can do?
Mhm.
And he says, yes, no, maybe. But then at least we have something of really what we need, and we can then go find the other person or somebody who might be able to do it, or a portion of it, or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, we still need this job description, so I don't think that should hold up anything we should be working on. What do we want, what do we envision needs to be done? Who should be looking at what when, and, keep that portion of it going. It's definitely not anything to vote on, I don't think, at this point. It's a work in progress.
It is, that's the point, is to get on a discussion, start thinking about what we would like that person to do. Again, we can't go out and solicit for anybody, we don't have anybody, we don't have any money to hire people. But,
We could do that.
well, we could, but we're firing
We
somebody
may have to do
for
it.
a couple
Yeah, we may
hours.
have to do that to get someone with
It's just-
the experience.
We may need to hire an expert for specific tasks. If in fact we need to have something serious done,
Yeah,
then that would be whoever's, the facilities manager is saying, this is beyond our scope, we need to hire somebody. All right, so anything you all have in mind about job description, if you can get it to me, send me an email blurb and I'll try to consolidate these kinds of things.
okay.
That doesn't mean I'm writing a job description, you all can contribute whatever, don't think that but I'd like some contributions.
Okay.
Okay, next item we have is an update on the transfer station.
Okay, I'd like to speak to that.
Okay. Can I beg your pardon, can we take about a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Sure.
Could we just shut down for about 5 minutes and come back at 25 after 8? I'd appreciate that. After 8, we shall reconvene after the meeting. Lucky for all, this was not an emergency call. So, the next item of business was an update on the transfer station in Europe.
Just to bring you all up to date on what has happened, Greg, who has been, I guess, gracious enough, I don't know if that's the right word, he's going to be the deputy transfer station supervisor. And he has agreed to take over supervising our attendant. And that basically what will happen is I'm still the supervisor of the transfer station and will be working, connecting with all of the outside agencies that I have to deal with, plus make periodic inspections and things like that, and pass that on to Greg, who will then go ahead and work directly with our attendant, which will be Dan Miller. And I think they're already on the job, from what I heard, that you met with him on Saturday.
Yeah, met with them Saturday, and our thinking and some of the impetus of this was just to try to, make it a little bit more concise for what he's doing up there. He's doing a good job, but we want to make it fail-proof in a lot of ways. And to also, have me just focus on that portion of it and Judy to do the majority of the other stuff. We're working on some, just looking at, not rewriting, meaning that we're changing anything, but we're rewriting the operating procedures in a way that he's, fully engaged in that, and he's been super helpful and wanting to do that. I think it's a great thing, because also when we have other people fill in, it's an easy, you hand them the document. I mean, right now there's probably 6 or 7 kind of governing documents of what goes on up there, and it's not all that straightforward sometimes, because it is getting more and more complicated, so.
Yeah, it is getting more complicated, and you and I are working on that document together, basically being much more specific on what the job requires in doing it.
And I've already
So that
talked to
there's
Dan too,
no-
and he's working on it too, so it's him and us, I mean, him and me, and certainly with your help and your, background or whatever.
I think it's a good idea. Lord knows, there have been so many changes in the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah, and it's getting much more stringent
Yeah.
in terms of, if you read the paper and all that's going on.
I just want to voice my disapproval of this, because we spoke last week at the meeting, in executive session about some things that were going to happen, and they didn't happen. And I was never brought into any of these decisions that were made, so I'm just sort of confused on where they came from. But I voiced my displeasure to Paul, and I just want to put that out there, that I feel we made a decision as a group, and we should have stuck by that decision, and then we could have had more discussions about it tonight or in the future.
I can speak to that a little bit about how, and it kind of leads into the next item, and not that, I'm not gonna bring that up now, but our thinking was there was some concerns of things going on at the transfer station. We had,
I think we have to have a point of order.
we're not,
Are we crossing a line with the employee discussion and stuff that would be in an executive session?
I wasn't gonna bring up anything.
Well, it sounds like we're talking about it already, mentioned the guy's name.
Well,
position.
just the working
I'm
with.
just wondering, I appreciate it.
No, I understand.
I hear your concern. I don't think that anything
Okay.
concerns.
I was not specific in what I said.
Yeah.
I do think it dovetails into our next one, so feel free to
Because
read over.
we talked about doing some, in general, doing employee reviews and talk about it for the rest of the offices and stuff like that too, and not just specifically for any one employee. And so that's kind of how it's expanded a little bit, and why we were looking at documenting some of these procedures and probably throughout the organization, throughout the town of different, make sure that everybody's position is pretty well documented for what they need to be doing, so that there's standards and there's measurements and there's, a regular basis for reviews. That's kind of how it evolved, and it seemed like we were putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit, from the way things, were changing from last week.
Okay, I just feel it should have been discussed with the larger group here. That's my opinion. So,
Mhm.
No, there was some things discussed that were, action was going to be taken, and it was not on the agenda. There was a scheduled appearance by an employee, right?
There was a discussion of it, yes. The specifics of which, going back into the executive session, trying to remember what we can talk about that we can't talk about.
Nothing, we can't talk about anything.
The gist of that session was to improve the situation. And this opportunity presented itself to improve the situation. So I think we're on the same track. The technique with which we chose to improve the situation, I don't know, it seemed to me a little less explosive, just easier to manage it.
it seemed less controversial.
Not so much controversial, it just seemed it was an opportunity to maybe ameliorate some of the issues that were coming up. And we may have that other, the other option later. It's not ruled out. We just want to try the best we can, making the situation comfortable for everybody and get some progress. We're interested in progress. We're interested in making things work. Any other questions, or do we?
It's difficult to really
Yeah,
kind
it's
of,
tough to do that.
because of not being in executive
Yeah, I
session.
believe we had made decisions.
Yes, we
When I
did.
walked out of the meeting last week, I believe decisions were made and those decisions were not followed, and that's what I was, that's what I am upset about.
And I think that you have a right to be.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, I appreciate that. I think that, anyway, this sort of leads into number 11, which is what you alluded to, about the schedule and procedures for employee reviews. When we started talking about implementing what you were talking about, we really haven't been, as a town, for years, doing the kinds of things that we're talking about doing. And doing it in a way that all of the employees, and I'm trying to get a sense of what we should be doing from a management perspective. I think of these kinds of reviews, personnel reviews, as positive both ways. I'd like to see people having positive reviews every so often. Then if something goes south, I got 6 positives and 1 bad one. But I think I'd like to see a dialogue going on. When I think in terms of a review process, it's also the individual talking about their sense of the job, their sense of how supportive we are as managers. I mean, it's a two-way kind of thing. We didn't have that in place. So now we're talking about, and that's why this is on number 11, because I think we should talk about the procedures and the schedule. Do we want to do individual reviews? 6-month basis, year basis?
Probably a year, usually it's a year.
Most places it's a year.
You usually set goals.
You might do a 6-month one when people first start,
Yeah,
to make sure everybody's on the same path, because it's kind of difficult. 6 months in or a year in, they say, I don't like the way this has been going on, when that person's been doing it that way without critique.
right.
So I'm inclined to think about the 6-month and then a year for the long-term employees.
It's not about that, it's working with employees to set goals.
Exactly.
And then meeting the goals,
Yes.
not meeting the goals, that's generally what the review process is. I think what you're talking about is if it hasn't existed before, trying to set up whatever, if the select board would be the people who would do this, or would it be you as the chair of the select board, or who, I mean, you're here in the office more. I'm just, those are the procedures, I'm curious about how we can do that.
We did them in the past before you were chair,
Yeah.
with the clerk, the treasurer.
We had some turnovers and we had some meetings and all those things, but it seemed to me, my memory was, we'd had actually done some reviews.
Right.
I think it's a good idea, personally. I'm not sure that people see reviews as positive, so when you present it to them, they get negative. But I'm thinking, no, we've got some really good people that I don't really think get how good they are. And I'd like to be in a position to say so. If there's some things that we need to modify along the way, we can do that, but we should pat them on the back for the good stuff they do as well.
Completely get it, a review is not necessarily bad.
No.
It's a review.
You know, it could be a review for a pay increase, that someone is doing such a good job that that may be part of the review, that actually happened.
That did. The tricky part is the pay increases are hard.
Well, I just remember that, to speak to what Tom just said, that it wasn't because they were in the hot seat, it was just a review.
Right,
I don't know how that fell by the wayside.
Disciplinary action is different than a review. You shouldn't be doing reviews as a disciplinary
Correct.
tool.
They should occur.
A review is across the board, everyone on the same standards, that we design those same standards, and then, you know, again, it's merit. So, yeah, if you're slacking off and not doing your work well, then yes, then you're gonna get a bad review, but if you're out there, you know, giving it your all, you know, you get a good review. I mean, it's that assessment, so.
Yeah. And so you and I are on the same page.
Yeah, not guaranteed either way, yeah.
I agree.
It's based on the employee's performance.
So the question then for the board is, do we want to establish a review after 6 months and then every year afterwards? Does that seem like a reasonable plan, or is that unreasonable?
I would think we do a review, and then we have a yearly review, and you could do a 6-month follow-up. Generally, when I worked at my previous position, we did year reviews, and then 6 months you meet with the employee and say, okay, here's the goals that we talked about, and it's not, here's the goals I'm giving you, it's the goals that you work out together that are important to both sides, both the town of Jamaica and the employee. And then you say, how you doing? Well, you know, I'm not gonna make these 3 because I just don't have time to do that, you know. So then you kind of get a feel for, you can adjust those things, and then at the year, you know, there's not a lot of surprises. So it's some structure around that, but I've done that. I mean, I've done those types of things.
That
so.
sounds good.
Yeah, I like the idea because back to my sense of, I think the 6 months for people who just joined us or in a new job. Just because waiting a year, they can get a lot of bad habits in a year, you know? So I'd like to see new employees start at 6 months. 3 months if they're having a lot of struggles, but 6 months if they're doing okay. And then chronic every year, to do a 12-month review. And we can set up like everybody gets reviewed in pick a month or 12 months on their anniversary. There's different ways we can do that, but I'd like some
And this
input.
is only the formal part, I mean, there should be continuous reviews on
You
this.
should be talking to them all the
But
time.
this formal part, I think, is the trigger for
Absolutely.
where we were thinking and
Yeah.
trying to redefine some stuff.
That way, if we do decide we want somebody to come in and talk to us, it's not automatically pejorative.
Right.
Which is kind of the direction we were headed, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. Do we as a group want to do this 6 month, 12-month thing?
Okay. Now with the road crew, are we gonna just review? Doesn't he give his guys reviews?
He should be the guy to do it.
But we're not gonna bring every road.
No.
No, we shouldn't do
Okay.
that.
No.
Just the people who report
Well,
into.
I said no, but I should ask you, what do you
I
think?
don't think so.
No, I
Okay.
think Keith should,
Keith should be the review.
he would come to us if something was amiss anyway, but
Sure.
we could just ask him how they were doing.
I suspect.
He would
that
be one of the
there's-
employees that would get a review.
Yeah, because he's head of the department.
With the listers. And do they would blue?
Aren't they their own?
They're their own.
They're their own
entity.
Well, they're
They're
told.
they're elected officials.
Oh, they are, okay, so
They're
they're
the
like.
select board.
Yeah, they sure
No,
don't.
they-
No, they don't.
No.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it would be town clerk, treasurer, road.
Road crew
road-
and
road
transfer.
foreman.
Road foreman and transfer. You need for the board to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the board would do the road.
The three positions, or who's the fourth?
Road foreman,
Road foreman,
transfer station attendant.
transfer station attendant,
Clerk,
clerk, treasurer,
treasurer.
who else?
What about
Select board.
bookkeeper?
And they get to critique us.
Is that just sort of a side thing?
That's a good question. How many hours does our bookkeeper work?
Mondays,
Just half a day.
Yeah.
Just half a day?
Yeah.
Do we want to make a distinction between part-time, less than,
Less than 32 hours or something.
that works for me.
Good, and we're 30.
You work 30, never
Never
end.
mind.
All right, so, but we're discussing this stuff. I'm not asking for a vote right now. I just want a sense of how we as a group look at this and understand that this is predicated very much on the discomfort I had with moving into the next level without having something down that we're all in agreement with for the review of our people. If that is acceptable to everybody?
So are we gonna then, we'll have to come up with a procedure,
there may be
There
one.
may be.
usually have the employee do a self-assessment
There-
where they rate themselves and
Yeah.
then you rate them and then you sit down and you try to, you have a discussion about, well, you think you're really good at
Do
that.
a
and
Yeah.
360 and their peers review too.
I know who does, nobody likes them.
All right, so what we can do then is, we agree as a group that we should look into and start formulating procedures to schedule and, the employee reviews.
And see if we
There's
have
more
one in
than
place
one.
already.
Good point, see if there's one in there I just missed.
Pretty sure there's.
Because there may be something that's archaic, needs to be fixed, or maybe something that'll work fine. Okay, we can do that. All right. Any other questions or discussions on number 11?
Just back to number 10,
Sure.
what was just discussed could have transpired on its own. You know, the superintendent and the assistant could work with each other and pass those duties back and forth without, you know, it being, have to be approved by us, I would think.
I think so.
Oh, completely.
But
But it was more
back
than
to
the
Tom's
detail of the
point,
executive. Yeah.
you know, I'm also not comfortable with what we discussed last meeting and what happened this meeting. Not, that didn't happen this meeting.
I'm confused with what you're saying.
Just to reiterate Tom's concern about what we talked about last
Okay.
week in, what do you call
Executive.
it? Executive session. I know that there were decisions made and they weren't implemented. We didn't talk about them. I almost called the chair, but I just thought I may have misunderstood.
Yeah. No, that was my
And I didn't
concern.
call anyone else, so that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So are you asking that we go back to
No.
our original?
Just that, I just want to confirm that we did talk about that and it didn't happen.
And I'm not happy about that,
Me either.
Okay.
because that was a decision we made as a board.
Any other discussions?
No?
Okay. Then, it's now 20 minutes till 9. I saw you guys came in together. I have, next on the list is public concern, but Rebecca, I have you down as a addition to the agenda. You said you wanted to say something about the energy on it, and can I assume that you're with, on the same idea?
Chris is, I would like for our energy coordinator, Chris, to, update the board on the progress of the revised energy plan that we're in the final stages of, and there's some adoption procedures that we need to go through, and also some final workings with Wyndham Regional that Chris is going to update you on.
Chris Robbins, I'm the Planning Commission's Energy Coordinator. As you may remember, we submitted an almost final draft to the Wyndham Regional Commission on just before July 1st. And in that, we addressed the two outstanding concerns you had in the review of our first draft, namely that we're taking an all of the above approach to meet renewable energy goals, solar, residential wind, and mini hydro. We added a table to the introduction section, which is, among other things, lists specifically that we're going to meet our goals with these three all the above approaches. So if somebody just reads the introduction and does want to dive into all the technical stuff, it's all right there and very explicit. And we discussed it at length in the rest of the document. And the second thing was there was some an interpretation of acting in enlightened self-interest, which we didn't mean. So we took that phrase out and made very clear that we're talking about cost savings that residents will enjoy as a consequence of adopting this plan. We had expected that we would get a determination from Marion Major, who's the Regional Commission's energy person, on whether we're compliant or not, but it turns out that they won't give that until the plan's adopted. So I honestly don't see any point in going through hearings and adoption when the plan is not going to be approved. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. So I asked her for an opinion anyhow, and I got an answer, which I'll read. And it reads, as for the draft from June, it meets the standards for the most part. Here are a few edits I suggest to more explicitly meet the standards. And then there's a list of 5 edits, which I didn't think we've made them all. They might be important, but they weren't very difficult to make and didn't change anything we said. So as of now, we have a plan that is going to meet the standards. We have a few cleanup items to do, the maps, which I know you've discussed. And we got a number of comments just before we submitted it to the regional council that we have to go through, but there were changes that make things stronger and it's not going to change anything. So we're good to go, I think, with the approval process. As soon as we finish up the document, we'll schedule hearings and then bring it to you for approval.
What's the time frame on this right now?
I'm sorry?
The time frame?
How long did
Is there a clock ticking on this?
Actually,
there's,
I don't think so.
go ahead.
I think it's 15 days and 30 days for 2 separate hearings. I can confirm that with you.
Starting
We'll
from-
get it.
Starting, as soon as we finish up.
We have to
the
post a
maps.
notice, and then that's when the day
Okay,
clock
all right.
starts ticking on that. And then after we get approval from the select board, then we move to Wyndham Regional. But we've met the major deadlines in terms of having it submitted to Wyndham Regional to meet our funding requirements, the grant money that we had received to get the help to create the plan.
I want to, personally, I've seen how much work you guys have done on this, and I want to thank you, because that's taken a lot to put this together. So I appreciate it a lot.
And then, dealing with or interacting with their Wyndham Regional Commission. I went to my first meeting and, I'll catch on probably after a while, but there were a couple of people from Londonderry that were trying to get something approved, some sort of plan, and they talked about the process they used to come up with their Londonderry town plan. And I think Chris may have mentioned that you were at that meeting, as you were there. Anyway, I could talk to you after about that, but he mentioned he saw you there. I assumed it was you. He thought you were the chair for the planning commission. So it was interesting, the process they have to go through.
Yeah.
Once they dealt with us.
It's pretty.
You have to meet a lot of rules and regulations, and they're very strict about the standards but that's in order so that every town's plans all across the state can meet a certain level of
Right.
credibility and enforceability, or at least not enforceability, but doability, I
Right.
guess, to coin a word.
Implementability.
Exactly. So the only thing I wanted to add to what Chris said is that he named the 3 ways that we could increase our energy production, but conservation is also a huge part of this, and that's one of the things that we're going to be working on this fall. We've joined the Efficiency Vermont's Button Up Vermont program, so we're going to be giving a couple of workshops on weatherization and places so that people can learn how to get that done, and also to actually get some money to help out with that process. So look forward to that.
Very good. You've been busy.
Thanks.
We have been.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Anybody have any questions for them? Thank you again very, very much. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in the future.
Absolutely.
More to come. All right. Dennis and I, do we have any other issues that we wish to bring up? We're looking pretty good. We have no other public. The public has spoken.
Make a motion to adjourn.
That's the right conclusion.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Guys, want to take off without signing things?